John Miller had always loved his ranch. It was not just land. It was freedom, hard work, and peace. The ranch was wide, with rolling green hills, a small pond where he liked to feed the ducks, and a barn that had stood for decades. He had inherited the property from his grandfather, who had taught him everything about ranch life. Every morning, John woke up to the sound of roosters and the fresh smell of hay. This life suited him perfectly. One sunny morning, John was walking toward the barn when a small envelope landed on the porch. He picked it up and frowned. The envelope had the initials HOA stamped in bold letters. John had never cared much about homeowners associations. After all, his ranch had been in the family for generations. He opened the envelope carefully. Inside was a notice demanding that he remove certain buildings from his property and follow rules he had never agreed to. John scratched his head. Buildings, rules. What are they talking about? He muttered. He read the notice again. It mentioned fines and even threatened to take legal action if he did not comply. He laughed loudly. Take legal action? They don't even own this land. John had always known that the HOA tried to control nearby properties, but they had no idea about his ranch. What they did not know was that he had quietly bought several pieces of land surrounding their office years ago. In fact, he owned the building where the HOA office operated. The notice burned in his hand as he felt a mix of anger and amusement. These people really think they can tell me what to do on my land, John said, shaking his head. He decided to go inside, get a cup of coffee, and think carefully. While he sipped his coffee, John planned his next move. He wanted to make a statement, but not in a way that would cause trouble. The HOA had always acted as if they were in charge of everything in the neighborhood, but John knew better. He had spent years quietly buying properties near his ranch. One day, he realized that one of those properties was the HOA office itself. A smile crept across his face. This could get interesting, he whispered. He put on his hat and walked toward the driveway. His old pickup truck, dusty but reliable, waited for him. He drove down the gravel road that led to the main entrance of his ranch, thinking about how he could teach the HOA a lesson without creating unnecessary conflict. When John arrived at the main gate, he saw the HOA manager standing by the office door. A middle-aged woman named Linda, known for her strict rules and sharp tongue, was waving at him. She seemed confident, as if she had already won. John rolled down his window and smiled politely. "Good morning, Linda," John said. "What brings you here today?" Linda walked closer and handed him a stack of papers. "Mr. Miller, this is a final notice. The HOA has decided that you are in violation of community regulations. You must remove your barn and fence immediately. Failure to comply will result in legal action." John leaned back in his seat, holding the papers. He studied Linda's face carefully. She looked proud, but there was also a hint of nervousness in her eyes. "I see," he said calmly. "And who authorized this notice?" Linda crossed her arms. "The HOA board. They reviewed everything and decided that your property does not comply with our rules." John nodded slowly. "Interesting. Do you realize that I own this building?" he asked, pointing to the HOA office. Linda's eyes widened. She stumbled over her words. "What do you mean? That's impossible." "This building is mine," John finished for her. "I purchased this property quietly a few years ago. So technically you are standing on my land while trying to tell me what to do on my ranch." Linda blinked. She tried to remain calm but clearly did not expect this news. She glanced at her clipboard, hoping for some backup from the papers, but there was none. John smiled. "I think we need to have a friendly conversation about rules and property ownership. I am more than willing to discuss community matters, but I don't respond well to threats. Let's sit down and talk." Linda hesitated but nodded. "Okay, let's talk," she said cautiously. John led her into the office, which he had visited only a few times before. It looked familiar but different now that he knew it belonged to him. He offered her a chair and poured both of them a cup of coffee. "You see, Linda," John began, "I love my ranch. I respect the community and I follow reasonable rules, but I will not allow anyone to intimidate me or tell me what to do on my own land. I believe in fairness, not threats." Linda nodded slowly, still unsure how to respond. "Mr. Miller, the HOA has procedures. We must follow them. These rules are for everyone's safety and property value." John leaned forward. "Safety and property value are important, yes. But this notice, this threat, was unnecessary. And now it's clear that you need to check who really owns what. I own this office and I own my ranch, so maybe we can find a way to work together without conflict." Linda looked around nervously. She could not deny the fact that John owned the land. Her mind raced. How had she never known this? She had spent years enforcing rules without realizing the power John held. John continued, "Here is my suggestion. We can meet once a month to discuss community matters. We respect each other's property, follow agreed-upon rules, and avoid misunderstandings. No threats, no fines, no stress. I think this would be better for everyone." Linda sighed, realizing that she had underestimated John. I think we can try that," she said carefully. John smiled warmly. "Good, that is all I ask. Cooperation works better than confrontation. And now, since you are standing on my land, let's remember that mutual respect is the key." After their conversation, Linda left the office quietly, holding the papers she had tried to use against him. John watched her go and shook his head with amusement. The HOA had never expected the ranch owner to have such control over their office. Back at the ranch, John walked among his animals. The cows looked at him with curiosity. The chickens pecked at the ground, and the barn stood proudly as if it knew it was safe. He felt a deep sense of satisfaction. For years, he had worked quietly, maintaining his property and respecting his neighbors. Now he had a clear path forward. That evening, as the sun set over the hills, John sat on his porch sipping a glass of lemonade. He watched the sky turn orange and pink. His ranch was peaceful, safe, and under his control. The notice from the HOA had caused worry for only a moment, but now it had become a story of triumph and calm strategy. John knew that this was only the beginning. The HOA might try other tactics, but he was ready. He had patience, knowledge of the law, and the confidence that came from owning his property in the office of those who had tried to challenge him. As the stars appeared in the sky, John whispered to himself, "They will learn to respect the land and the people who work it, and I will make sure they do it with fairness, not fear." For the first time in days, John felt completely relaxed. He knew his ranch, his animals, and his land were safe, and he also knew that sometimes the best way to protect what you love is to quietly prepare for surprises, then face them with patience and strategy. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, and John was ready. But for now, the ranch was quiet, and peace reigned over the rolling hills and the barn that had withstood time, weather, and even the boldest threats of an overconfident homeowners association. The next morning, John Miller woke up early as usual. The sun had not yet risen, but the ranch was already alive with sounds. Chickens clucked near the barn, a soft breeze moved the tall grass, and the cows were beginning to stir. John loved this calm before the day's work. He had expected the HOA to react to their meeting the day before. Linda's quiet departure had not convinced him that the association had forgotten their threats. He knew they would try something again, probably with more paperwork or attempts to assert authority. John had learned to stay calm and think carefully. Confrontation rarely worked. Clever strategy always did. After feeding the animals, John went into town to check on some ranch supplies. The small grocery store and feed shop were his usual stops. As he walked inside, he overheard two people talking near the counter. "I heard the Miller ranch owner is owning the HOA office now," one said. "Yes," the other replied. "They tried to kick him off his land, but he surprised them. People are saying he is smarter than anyone expected." John smiled quietly. He paid for his supplies and left without being noticed. He enjoyed the idea that word was spreading, but he also knew it might make the HOA more determined to challenge him. Returning to the ranch, John noticed a black SUV parked near the main gate. Two men in suits were stepping out. They looked serious and professional, carrying briefcases. John's curiosity grew. He walked toward them slowly, keeping a friendly smile on his face. "Good morning," John greeted. "Can I help you?" One of the men introduced himself. "Mr. Miller, we are legal representatives from the HOA. We are here to discuss the recent notice and your alleged violations." John nodded. "I see. And do you realize that you are standing on my property while representing an organization I partially own?" The men exchanged glances but did not respond immediately. John continued, "I believe in solving problems calmly. Please, let's sit inside and talk. Coffee?" They agreed, following John into the main house. John poured 3 cups of coffee and gestured for them to sit at the large wooden table in the kitchen. Now, John began. "I understand that the HOA believes I am in violation of certain rules, but the truth is I own my ranch and I also own the land that the HOA office sits on. So technically, this meeting is happening on my property." The men looked nervous. One of them cleared his throat. "Yes, sir. We understand. But the board insists that all community members follow the rules. They are concerned about property standards and neighborhood order." John leaned back in his chair. "Order and rules are important, but they must be reasonable. I have been following the law and respecting my neighbors. The notice you sent yesterday threatened legal action without proper reason. That is not how cooperation works." The second man spoke cautiously. "Sir, the HOA is used to handling these matters. We were following standard procedure. We did not mean any disrespect." John smiled. "I understand that. But the difference is, I own land and buildings quietly over time. This gives me more influence than you realize. I am willing to work with the HOA, but I will not respond to threats or intimidation. Now, what is the board's proposal?" The first man opened his briefcase and pulled out more documents. "They suggest removing certain structures, including your barn and fence. They also request monthly reports on property changes." John shook his head. "Removing my barn? That is absurd. It has been here for decades. The fence? That is necessary for my livestock. Monthly reports? I am not a tenant. I am a landowner. This is overreach." The men looked unsure. John continued calmly. "Here is my proposal. We establish one monthly meeting where reasonable concerns are discussed. No fines, no threats, and no unnecessary paperwork. Cooperation benefits everyone. Aggressive action benefits no one." The men looked at each other, clearly unsure how to respond. John's calm confidence had shifted the balance of power. They realized that he was not only the owner of the ranch but also held authority over the HOA office. Finally, the first man said, "Mr. Miller, the board will need time to consider your proposal. They may not agree immediately." John nodded. "That is fine. I respect proper procedure. I also suggest that until a mutual agreement is reached, the HOA stop sending notices that threaten fines or legal action. This will prevent unnecessary conflict." After the men left, John walked outside to check the livestock. He felt satisfied. The ranch was safe, the animals were healthy, and the power balance had shifted in his favor. He knew that the HOA would think twice before attempting another aggressive move. As he inspected the fences, John noticed some neighbors walking by. They waved and smiled. Many of them had watched the drama unfold with curiosity. Word had spread that John had cleverly handled the HOA's threats. Some neighbors had feared confrontation, but John had shown that calm, clear strategy could protect one's rights without conflict. Later in the afternoon, John received a call from Linda, the HOA manager. She sounded nervous. "Mr. Miller, the board wants to meet. They want to discuss rules and boundaries. Can we come tomorrow?" John smiled. "Of course. We can meet at the office. Let's keep it professional and respectful. That is all I ask." The next day, John prepared for the meeting. He reviewed the property maps, ownership documents, and notes from previous conversations. He wanted to ensure there was no misunderstanding. He also planned a friendly gesture. A small basket of fresh fruits and vegetables from his garden sat on the table, a sign of goodwill. Linda arrived first, followed by 2 board members. They looked tense. John greeted them warmly, offering coffee and a place to sit. "Thank you for coming," John said. "I hope we can discuss everything calmly and reach a fair agreement. Cooperation and respect should guide our decisions, not threats." Linda hesitated but nodded. One of the board members spoke. "Mr. Miller, we realize the notice was unnecessary. The board wants to apologize. We also want to establish proper guidelines for everyone in the community, including your ranch." John smiled. "I appreciate that. My proposal is simple: monthly meetings, reasonable rules, and mutual respect. The ranch will continue to operate as it has for decades. The office will function normally. Let us focus on cooperation, not conflict." The board members exchanged glances and nodded. Slowly, a sense of relief filled the room. They had expected a confrontation, but John's calm, clever approach had turned the situation into a negotiation. As the meeting concluded, John escorted them to the door. "Thank you for coming. I hope this is the start of a better relationship. Everyone deserves respect and everyone deserves clear communication." Linda paused. "Mr. Miller, I think we underestimated you. We will follow your guidance and avoid unnecessary conflict in the future." John smiled warmly. "Good. That is all I ask." After they left, John walked outside, feeling a sense of victory. The ranch remained safe, his animals were unharmed, and the HOA had learned a valuable lesson. Threats and paperwork alone could not intimidate someone who knew their rights and handled situations wisely. That evening, John sat on the porch watching the sunset. The ranch was peaceful, the hills glowing orange and the barn casting a long shadow. He felt proud of what he had accomplished. The HOA might try new tricks in the future, but he had shown that intelligence, patience, and strategy were far more powerful than threats. As night fell, John closed the barn, fed the animals one last time, and walked to his house. He knew that this was only the beginning of a long, careful relationship with the HOA, but he was ready. With patience, confidence, and respect for the land and the law, he could handle anything. The stars appeared in the sky, and the ranch glowed under the soft light. John felt a deep sense of peace. He had faced the first challenge, turned it into an opportunity, and established control with wisdom and patience. He was the guardian of his ranch, the owner of his land, and now, the clever protector of the office that had tried to threaten him. And with that thought, John went inside, ready for the next day, confident that the ranch, his animals, and his land would remain safe under his careful watch. A few days after the peaceful meeting with the HOA board, John Miller was back to his usual routine on the ranch. He woke up at sunrise, fed the chickens, checked on the cows, and inspected the fences. Everything seemed normal. The sun rose over the hills, casting long shadows across the barn and the rolling green fields. John felt confident. The HOA had apologized and promised to respect his property, but experience had taught him not to underestimate their determination. People in positions of authority often wanted to prove power, even when they were wrong. John decided to stay alert. He was walking along the fence line when a truck drove slowly down the gravel road leading to his property. From the truck, a man in a suit stepped out carrying a small camera. He was followed by a woman holding a clipboard. Both looked official and serious. John walked over, smiling politely. "Good morning. Can I help you?" The man cleared his throat. "Mr. Miller, we are here from the HOA. We are conducting property inspections. We need to take measurements and photographs of your structures for community records." John raised an eyebrow. "I see. And do you realize that you are on my property while doing this inspection?" The woman glanced nervously at her clipboard. "Yes, but this is standard procedure. The board requested it." John smiled calmly. "Very well. Let's do this properly. You may measure and photograph, but you must follow my rules. Respect my property and we will have no problems." The man and woman hesitated. They had expected resistance, but John's calm confidence made them cautious. "Of course," the man said finally. "We will follow your rules." John led them to the barn first. He explained, "This barn has stood for decades. It houses animals, tools, and supplies. Please do not touch anything without asking." The woman made notes while the man took photographs. John watched closely. He noticed small signs of tension. They were uncomfortable because they had not expected a ranch owner to assert control over their inspection. After finishing at the barn, they moved to the fence. John showed them the posts, the wire, and the gates. "This fence keeps the animals safe. It is necessary. You may note it, but understand its importance." The inspection continued slowly. John answered questions politely but firmly. The visitors realized that they were not dealing with a timid ranch owner. He was confident, knowledgeable, and entirely in control of his property. By the time the inspection ended, the sun was high in the sky. John walked the visitors to the gate. "Thank you for coming. Remember, this property is private. Respect and cooperation are always the best approach." The visitors nodded quickly and left. John watched them drive away, smiling. "They will think twice before trying anything aggressive again," he said to himself. Later that afternoon, John returned to the ranch house and opened his laptop. He wanted to review some documents related to his land purchases. Over the years, he had quietly acquired several properties surrounding the HOA office. This strategy had not only protected his ranch, but also gave him leverage over the association. He checked maps, deeds, and contracts to ensure everything was in order. As he worked, the phone rang. It was Linda, the HOA manager. She sounded nervous. "Mr. Miller, The board wants to meet again. They say there have been complaints from neighbors about your barn and fence. Can we come tomorrow? John smiled calmly. Of course. I am happy to meet and discuss any concerns. We will follow the same approach as before, cooperation and respect. The next morning, the board arrived at the HOA office which John owned. He welcomed them politely, offering coffee and a place to sit. The board members looked tense, clearly unsure of what to expect. John began the meeting. I understand there have been complaints. Let's discuss them calmly and reasonably. My ranch and my structures are necessary for daily operations. I am willing to listen, but threats or aggressive actions will not solve anything. Linda spoke first. Mr. Miller, the neighbors say your barn is too tall and your fence is too long. They are concerned about property views and aesthetics. John nodded. I understand their concerns. But this barn and fence are functional. They protect animals and equipment. Safety and practicality are more important than appearance. We can discuss landscaping or painting if that helps neighbors feel better, but the structures themselves cannot be removed. One board member frowned. But the rules? We have community standards. All properties should comply. John leaned forward. Community standards are important, yes, but they must be reasonable. My ranch existed long before many rules were made. I respect neighbors and the community, but I will not remove structures that are necessary for my livelihood. Another board member looked at Linda. Maybe we should accept his proposal. He has control over the property and we risk legal trouble if we push too hard. Linda hesitated but agreed. We can work with him. Perhaps monthly meetings will prevent misunderstandings. John smiled warmly. Exactly. Cooperation works far better than conflict. Let us respect each other's property and focus on solutions instead of threats. After the meeting, the board members left, clearly relieved. John walked outside to the ranch feeling satisfied. He had turned the situation around again. The HOA had learned that he was not only knowledgeable and patient, but also clever and prepared. As John checked the livestock in the afternoon, a young boy from a neighboring property approached him. Mr. Miller, can I help feed the chickens? He asked shyly. John smiled. Of course. Come on, I'll show you how. The boy followed John, helping him scatter feed for the chickens. John explained. Feeding animals is not just about giving food. You must watch them, understand their behavior, and ensure they are safe. The boy listened carefully, asking questions. John realized that teaching others about ranch life was rewarding. The boy left with a smile, grateful for the experience. That evening, John returned to the porch watching the sun set over the hills. He felt a deep sense of peace. The ranch was safe, the animals were healthy, and the HOA had learned a valuable lesson. But John also knew that challenges might arise again. People who had tried to intimidate him were unlikely to give up completely. He was ready, though. His strategy had proven effective. Calm, patience, and clever preparation always won over aggression and threats. As stars appeared in the night sky, John sipped his lemonade. The ranch glowed under the soft moonlight. He whispered to himself, "The land belongs to those who care for it, and I will always care for this ranch, my animals, and my property." Suddenly, he noticed a light moving near the far edge of the ranch. At first, he thought it was an animal, but then he realized it was a person. He grabbed his flashlight and walked carefully toward the figure. "Who's there?" John called. A woman stepped into the light, raising her hands. "Mr. Miller, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to trespass. I just wanted to talk." John kept the flashlight steady. "Talk about what?" The woman looked nervous. "I work for a neighboring property owner. We heard about the HOA situation. I wanted to understand how you handle conflicts. You are clever and calm. I think we could learn from you." John smiled. "Well, the best way to handle conflict is to remain patient, know your rights, and act with respect. Threats and aggression never solve anything. Cooperation does." The woman nodded, clearly impressed. "Thank you. I wanted to see it for myself. You have handled everything very well." John offered her a seat on the porch. "Sit, have some lemonade. I am always happy to share lessons from the ranch. Conflict can be challenging, but patience and strategy make it manageable." As the night grew darker, John and the woman talked about land, responsibility, and community. The ranch was quiet, peaceful, and safe. John knew that this calm, clever approach would continue to protect his property and maintain respect from neighbors and the HOA alike. For John Miller, the ranch was more than land. It was a life of patience, intelligence, and respect. And with each challenge, he proved that careful preparation and clever strategy were more powerful than threats or fear. A week had passed since John Miller had hosted the neighbor who wanted to learn from him. Life on the ranch had returned to its normal rhythm. The animals were fed, the fences were intact, and the barn stood proudly against the horizon. John felt confident that the HOA had learned their lesson. But he also knew better than to underestimate people who had been proven wrong. They often came back with bolder plans. That morning, as John checked the water trough for the cattle, he noticed a small group of people approaching from the road. There were 3 men in suits and 2 women carrying clipboards. They walked with an air of authority, as if they believed they could impose their rules regardless of John's ownership. John's eyebrows rose. Well, it seems they are not giving up. He wiped his hands on a rag and walked toward the group. "Good morning," John said calmly, keeping his hands visible. "How can I help you today?" One of the men stepped forward. "Mr. Miller, we are here on behalf of the HOA. We have brought inspectors to check your property and ensure compliance with community rules." John smiled. "Inspectors, I see. And do you realize that you are standing on my property while doing this inspection?" The woman with the clipboard looked slightly startled but kept her composure. "Yes, sir. But this is a standard HOA procedure." John nodded slowly. "Very well. I will cooperate, but you must follow my rules. Respect my land, my animals, and my property. Any unnecessary interference will be considered trespassing." The group looked uneasy. John led them to the barn first. He showed them the sturdy beams, the livestock, and the storage areas. "This barn has been here for decades. It is essential for my work. Observe carefully but do not touch anything." As the inspection continued, John noticed subtle signs of panic in the group. They were uncomfortable because they realized John's calm confidence made them appear small in comparison. He continued guiding them through the property, explaining each fence, gate, and pasture. After the barn and fence were inspected, John took them to the pond. Ducks swam peacefully and the water reflected the clear blue sky. This pond is part of the ranch ecosystem. It provides water for animals and supports local wildlife. Please make a note of its significance. The visitors wrote notes and took pictures, but their uneasy expressions suggested they were frustrated. John observed them quietly, knowing that patience and knowledge were more powerful than confrontation. When the inspection ended, John invited the group to sit on the porch. He poured them coffee and offered homemade cookies. "Let us have a conversation," he said kindly. "I believe that cooperation works better than conflict." One of the men spoke hesitantly. "Mr. Miller, the board is concerned that your property does not comply with certain rules. We must submit a full report." John nodded. "I understand your concerns. But my property is functional, safe, and necessary for daily work. I am willing to listen to reasonable suggestions, but I will not accept demands that remove essential structures." The woman with the clipboard asked, "What about the barn's height? Some neighbors say it blocks their view." John smiled. "The barn is old and sturdy. It is essential for my animals. Views are not more important than safety or practicality. I respect neighbors' opinions, but the barn cannot be moved or shortened." The group looked frustrated but remained polite. John continued, "If there are concerns, we can discuss solutions that do not threaten the property or animals. Cooperation is the key. Threats do not solve problems." After the group left, John walked along the pasture, reflecting on the events of the day. He knew the HOA might not give up entirely. People often tried different tactics when their first plans failed. But John had a strategy. He had quietly secured the land surrounding the HOA office, giving him leverage. He had documented his ownership and the property's importance. That evening, as the sun set behind the hills, John received a call from a lawyer. "Mr. Miller, I've reviewed the HOA's latest actions. They are testing boundaries, but you are fully protected. Your ownership of the ranch and the office is clear. If they escalate, we can respond quickly." John smiled. "Thank you. I appreciate your guidance. I prefer to resolve matters calmly, but it is good to know we are prepared." The next morning, a large black SUV drove up to the ranch. Out stepped 3 board members looking determined. They carried clipboards, cameras, and measuring tools. John walked toward them calmly, keeping his hands visible. "Good morning," he said. "I see you are persistent. How can I help?" One of the board members spoke firmly. Mr. Miller, we are conducting a full property evaluation. This is necessary to maintain community standards, John nodded. Very well. You may conduct your evaluation, but remember, this is private property. Respect and cooperation are required. Safety of animals and property comes first. The evaluation began, but John noticed subtle mistakes. The board members were rushing, not observing carefully. They were eager to find faults that did not exist. John decided to teach them a lesson in patience. He guided them slowly through the property, explaining each structure's purpose and historical importance. He showed them the barn, the fences, the pond, and the fields. Each explanation was calm, clear, and informative. The visitors wrote notes but realized they could not find real violations. By the time the evaluation ended, the board members looked exhausted and frustrated. John invited them to the porch for coffee. You have seen the ranch thoroughly, he said kindly. Do you understand why these structures are necessary? The board members nodded silently. John continued, I respect rules and standards. I am willing to cooperate, but threats, fines, and aggressive actions achieve nothing. Cooperation and communication are far more effective. The board members left quietly, clearly realizing that John had the upper hand. His calm, patient approach had disarmed their aggression and taught them that intelligence and preparation could prevent unnecessary conflict. That evening, John walked among the animals, feeding the chickens and checking the fences. The ranch was peaceful, and the sun painted the sky with warm colors. John reflected on the week's events. He had handled multiple inspections, threats, and challenges without anger. His strategy had always been calm, clear, and prepared. Suddenly, a neighbor appeared at the gate. Mr. Miller, the neighbor called, I just wanted to thank you. We saw how you handled the HOA. You are clever and fair. It has taught many of us how to manage our own conflicts. John smiled warmly. Thank you. Remember, patience, knowledge, and respect are always better than threats or aggression. Conflict can be managed with calm thinking and preparation. The neighbor nodded, clearly impressed. We will keep that in mind. Thank you again. As night fell, John returned to the porch with a glass of lemonade. The ranch glowed under the soft light of the moon, and the animals were safe in their pens. John knew that the HOA might try other schemes, but he also knew he was ready. His patience, intelligence, and clear strategy had proven stronger than aggression and threats. He whispered to himself, The ranch belongs to those who care for it, and I will always care for this land, my animals, and my property. The stars appeared one by one, twinkling over the hills and the barn. John felt a sense of calm and satisfaction. The ranch was safe, the animals were protected, and the HOA had learned that cleverness, patience, and respect were far more powerful than threats. For John Miller, the ranch was more than land. It was a life of preparation, intelligence, and courage. Each challenge taught him that being calm, patient, and clever was the true way to protect what one loved. And with each sunrise, he knew he would continue to safeguard his ranch and his legacy with wisdom and care. The morning sun rose over John Miller's ranch with a soft golden glow. Birds chirped in the trees and the pond reflected the clear sky. John walked through his property, checking the fences and feeding the animals. Life on the ranch had always been hard work, but it was also peaceful and rewarding. After the week of HOA inspections and evaluations, John felt a mix of calm and readiness. He knew the HOA would try to recover their authority, but he was confident. His patience, knowledge of his land, and clever strategy had prepared him for every challenge so far. As he walked toward the barn, John noticed a small group of neighbors gathering near the entrance. Many had come to see him after hearing about his interactions with the HOA. They were curious, impressed, and even supportive. One of the neighbors, a tall man named Samuel, waved. John, can we talk for a moment? Of course, John said warmly. Come inside the barn. It is cooler there. Inside, the group settled on some hay bales. Samuel spoke first. We have watched how you handled the HOA. You were calm, clever, and fair. Many of us were afraid they could control our properties. You have shown us that it is possible to protect our land without anger or confrontation. John smiled. Thank you. The key is patience, preparation, and understanding your rights. People often confuse threats with authority, but true authority comes from knowledge and respect. Another neighbor, a woman named Maria, added, We also appreciate how you treat your land and animals. It shows that responsibility matters more than just rules. John nodded. Exactly. Respect for the land, respect for others, and respect for rules that make sense. That is how we build strong communities. Aggression only creates conflict. The neighbors left with smiles and gratitude. John returned to his porch feeling proud of the community around him. He had defended his ranch not just for himself, but for the example it would set for others. Later that afternoon, John received a call from Linda, the HOA manager. Her voice sounded hesitant but polite. "Mr. Miller, the board wants to make an official agreement. They have reviewed the evaluations and understand your property is necessary and legal. They want to ensure no further conflicts." John's eyes brightened. "That sounds good. What are the terms?" Linda explained. "We propose monthly meetings for discussion, respect for property rights, and proper communication before any actions. The board also apologizes for the earlier threats and notices." John nodded. "I accept these terms. Cooperation works better than conflict. Let us keep it professional and fair." The next day, John met with the board in the HOA office which he owned. The atmosphere was calm, and everyone approached the table with respect. John offered coffee as usual and began the meeting. "Thank you for agreeing to meet," John said. "I believe respect, cooperation, and clear communication are the best ways to maintain community harmony. Let us ensure we follow these principles." Linda and the board members nodded. "We understand, Mr. Miller," Linda said. "We also appreciate your patience and guidance. We will follow the agreed terms and respect your property and authority." John smiled. "Good. That is all I ask." The board members left the office with a new sense of understanding. John had not only protected his ranch and office, but had also earned their respect. His clever strategy, calm demeanor, and clear knowledge of property law had turned potential conflict into a strong, respectful agreement. Back at the ranch, John walked among the animals, feeding the chickens and checking the fences. Everything was peaceful, and the sun set in brilliant orange and pink hues. He felt a deep satisfaction. Years of quiet work, patience, and careful planning had paid off. His ranch, his office, and his authority were safe. That evening, a young boy from a neighboring property came running toward John. "Mr. Miller, I heard what happened with the HOA. You were amazing. Can you teach me how to handle conflicts like you?" John laughed warmly. "Of course. Come with me." He guided the boy through the property, explaining how to observe, plan, and remain calm when facing challenges. "The key is to know your rights, respect others, and stay patient. Aggression never helps. Intelligence and strategy are always better." The boy listened carefully, absorbing every word. John realized that teaching the next generation was part of his legacy. Protecting his land was not just about property. It was about showing others how to be responsible, clever, and fair. As night fell, John walked to the porch with a glass of lemonade. The barn glowed softly in the moonlight. The pond shimmered, and the animals were safe in their pens. He felt a deep sense of peace and accomplishment. He reflected on the challenges of the past weeks. The HOA had been aggressive, persistent, and determined to impose rules unfairly. But John had responded with patience, preparation, and intelligence. He had protected his ranch without anger, proven his authority, and earned respect from both the HOA and his neighbors. Suddenly, Linda appeared at the gate. She walked cautiously toward the porch. "Mr. Miller, I wanted to thank you personally," she said. "You have shown us how to handle situations fairly. We will make sure the board follows your guidance." John smiled warmly. "Thank you, Linda. Cooperation and respect make communities stronger. I hope this is a new beginning for all of us." Linda nodded, clearly relieved and impressed. She left the ranch with a renewed understanding of the importance of patience and fairness. The next morning, John woke early as usual. The sun rose over the hills, casting long shadows across the barn and fields. He walked among the animals, checking the fences and feeding the livestock. The ranch was safe, productive, and peaceful. John thought about the lessons he had learned. Owning property was not just about having land. It was about responsibility, knowledge, and preparation. Threats, paperwork, and aggression were never the solution. Calm, clear thinking, respect for the law, and clever strategy could solve even the most difficult conflicts. Later in the day, John took a walk along the pond, watching the ducks swim peacefully. He reflected on how far he had come. The HOA had started with threats and notices, expecting to control him. Instead, they had encountered patience, intelligence, and preparation. Now they respected his authority and understood the value of cooperation. That evening, neighbors came by to visit the ranch. They congratulated John on his clever handling of the HOA and asked for advice on their own property matters. John welcomed them warmly, sharing lessons about patience, strategy, and fairness. As the stars appeared in the night sky, John sat on the porch sipping his lemonade. The ranch glowed under the moonlight, the barn standing tall and proud. The pond reflected the stars and the animals slept peacefully. John whispered to himself, "This ranch belongs to those who care for it. I have protected it, my office, and my neighbors, and I will continue to do so with patience, knowledge, and fairness." He looked at the horizon, feeling a deep sense of pride and accomplishment. His ranch was more than land. It was a life of hard work, wisdom, and respect. Every challenge had been met with intelligence and patience. Every threat had been turned into an opportunity for calm, fair resolution. John knew that the future would bring new challenges, but he was ready. His property, his animals, and his community were safe. The HOA had learned a valuable lesson. Respect, preparation, and clever strategy always win over threats, paperwork, and intimidation. The night was quiet and peaceful. John Miller's ranch stood as a symbol of wisdom, perseverance, and clever strategy. The barn, the fences, the pond, and the fields were safe under his care. The HOA respected him, neighbors admired him, and the animals thrived under his protection. John smiled, knowing that he had achieved more than victory over a homeowners association. He had shown that calm intelligence, fairness, and preparation were the strongest tools of all. And with that, he leaned back on his porch sipping his lemonade and watched the stars sparkle over the hills, proud of his ranch, his office, and the life he had built.